My name is Idris Fain. I am 28 years old. And the Saturday afternoon, my mother stood up at my sister's engagement party and told 60 guests that I had been stealing from her for 3 years was the day I finally understood that the person who taught you to manage money carefully can also be the person who turns that carefulness into a weapon, and that the only defense against it is a paper trail they forgot they signed. I want to tell you what happened at that party. But the party is the last 15 minutes of a story that starts in a different room 3 years earlier. The afternoon my mother called me from her kitchen and said she needed help and she did not know who else to ask. My mother's name is Vera. She is 58. She and my father separated when I was 22 after 29 years of a marriage that had been held together, I think, more by habit and by the children than by anything that remained between them. The separation was not dramatic. My father moved to a small house 40 minutes away. They divided things without a lawyer, and they remained in the specific cautious relationship of two people who have known each other too long to be strangers and have too little left between them to be close. My mother kept the house. She kept the car. She kept the garden, which she tends with a devotion that I suspect is partly about the garden and partly about having something that responds predictably to care. What she did not keep and did not have was any fluency with the financial infrastructure of her own life. My father had managed their accounts for 29 years. The mortgage, the direct debits, the insurance renewals, the investment account they had built slowly over the course of their marriage. My mother had been involved in none of it, not because she was incapable, but because the arrangement had calcified over decades into a division of labor that left her, at 55, holding access to accounts she did not understand and obligations she had never tracked. I am a financial operations analyst. I have been since I was 23 at a company called Marrow Capital that manages institutional investment portfolios for a client base of pension funds and charitable endowments. My work is, at its core, the management of large flows of money through complex account structures, tracking what moves where, ensuring the authorization trail is complete, flagging discrepancies before they become errors and errors before they become problems. I am good at it. I am good at it in the way that people are good at things that suit the exact structure of their attention. I notice when numbers do not add up. I remember account reference numbers without writing them down, and I have an instinct for the place in a transaction record where the documentation is thinner than it should be and needs reinforcement. When my mother called and said she needed help, I drove over that afternoon. We sat at her kitchen table, and I looked at what she had. The picture was not catastrophic, but it was complicated. Several accounts she had not known existed. A mortgage payment that had been drawing from the wrong account for 6 months and had produced an unauthorized overdraft, 3 insurance policies with auto-renewals she had not reviewed, and a standing order to a charity she did not recognize that my father had set up years earlier and that neither of them had canceled. It took me 4 hours to understand the full landscape. At the end, I gave her a written summary. I do this as a matter of course because verbal summaries are forgotten and written ones can be consulted, and I told her what needed to be addressed in what order. She said, "Can you just do it?" I said I could set up the structures and manage the transfers, but that I wanted to do it transparently, that every action would be logged, every transfer would have her explicit authorization, and that I would send her a written record of everything I did at the end of each month, so she could review it. She said that was fine. She said she trusted me. I said I was glad and that the written record was not because I doubted her trust, but because good financial management does not rely on trust alone. It relies on documentation, which is what protects both parties if anyone ever needs to understand what happened and why. She said I was very thorough. I said it was my job. This conversation is the one I have returned to many times in the 3 years since. Not with regret. I said what I said because it was correct, but with the specific awareness of someone who understood in retrospect that she was putting a record in place that she did not yet know she would need. What followed was 3 years of unremarkable, careful financial management. I set up the transfers my mother needed, moving money between her accounts to cover the mortgage, managing the timing of her pension deposits against her monthly bills, adjusting the standing orders that needed adjusting, and canceling the ones that should have been canceled years ago. I sent her a written summary every month. Every summary documented what had been transferred, from which account, to which account, on which date, and noted the authorization. either a direct instruction from her by text or email, which I kept, or a standing authorization she had given for recurring transfers, which I noted in the log. The written summaries arrived in her email inbox every first of the month for 36 months. She read them. I know because she replied to several of them with questions, and I answered each question in writing and kept those replies as part of the record. She never raised a concern. She never said a transfer had occurred that she had not authorized. She said at a family dinner in the second year that having me manage things had taken a weight off her, and my father, who was there for that particular gathering, nodded in the way he nods when he is registering information without commenting on it. My sister Priya's engagement was announced in January of this year. She and her fiancé Ethan had been together for 4 years, and the engagement was not a surprise, and the party was planned for June, a garden marquee at my mother's house, 60 guests, the specific effort that my mother brings to occasions she has decided are important. I helped with the planning in the same way I help with most things logistically, behind the scenes, managing the catering contract and the hire company invoices and the timeline. Priya was focused on the invitation list and the details she cared about. My mother was focused on the presentation. I was focused on the infrastructure. In April, 2 months before the party, the bank sent a letter. The bank, a regional institution called Prentice Savings where my mother held her primary current account, had updated its authorization documentation policy for third-party account management. The new policy required account holders who had granted third-party transfer access to confirm in writing that the access was authorized and ongoing. The letter was a standard communication sent to all customers who had active third-party management arrangements, requesting a signed confirmation form within 30 days. The letter arrived at my mother's address because the account was hers. I did not see it. I was not copied on correspondence to her accounts. I had access to execute transfers, but I was not a joint account holder, and I did not receive her mail. I knew the policy update was coming because Prentice had communicated it to all authorized third parties through the online management portal, and I had seen the notification and made a note to follow up with my mother to complete the confirmation form. Before I followed up, the letter arrived in my mother's mailbox. I do not know exactly when she read it. I do not know exactly what she understood when she read it. What I know is what happened afterward, which I have reconstructed from several conversations over the following months, from my uncle Raymond, from Priya, and eventually from my mother herself. She read the letter. She read the line that said, "If you did not authorize this access, please contact us immediately." She read it in the wrong order, that line second rather than first, without reading the context that established it as a standard policy confirmation and not an alert. She read it in the specific cognitive state of a woman who had been told, by someone she had not identified to me, that the financial arrangement she had with her daughter was something she should review more carefully. That someone, I learned much later, was a woman named Jillian who attended the same weekly walking group as my mother. Jillian's daughter had gone through a divorce the previous year that had involved a disputed joint account, and Jillian had been, in the weeks since, alert to what she described as financial red flags in family relationships. She had asked my mother, in one of their walks, whether she had fully understood all the transfers that had been going out of her account. My mother had said she thought so. Jillian had said she should make sure. My mother had not called me to ask. She had not replied to the bank's letter with the confirmation form. She had, instead, spent 2 months constructing a different version of the 3 years, one in which the monthly summaries were paperwork she had not fully understood. The authorizations were things she had agreed to without knowing what they meant, and the transfers were a pattern of extraction that she had only now, with Jillian's prompting, begun to see clearly. She had said nothing to me in those 2 months. She had continued to reply to my monthly summaries. She had continued to let me manage the accounts. And she had waited for the engagement party. I did not know any of this when I arrived at my mother's house on the Saturday of Priya's engagement party. I had helped set up the marquee the day before. I had confirmed the caterers that morning. I had my own assigned table near the middle of the marquee, between my cousin Delphine and a space that had been left for my uncle Raymond, who had said he might be a few minutes late because he was coming directly from his allotment. Raymond arrived at 1:30, 20 minutes into the reception. He was in a clean shirt and had changed his shoes but still had the specific quality of a man who has been outside all morning. He sat down beside me and put his jacket over the back of his chair and said something about the allotment and the weather, and I said something back, and then the reception continued, and I refilled my water glass and talked to Delphine about her daughter's school and watched Priya move through the room with the specific happiness of a person whose occasion is going exactly as it should. At 2 o'clock, my mother stood up. She stood at the front of the marquee with a glass, which produced the expectant quiet of an audience that believes a toast is coming. She thanked people for being there. She said something about Priya and Ethan that was warm and specific. She is good at occasions, my mother, and the opening 2 minutes were exactly what they should have been. People smiled. Priya smiled. Ethan looked at his fiancée with the expression of a man who is pleased with where his life has arrived. Then my mother said she had something else she needed to say. She said that for the past 3 years she had been struggling to understand a pattern of transactions in her financial accounts, money moving in ways she had not fully understood or authorized. She said she had now come to believe that these transactions had not been in her interest and that she had been taken advantage of by a family member she had trusted. She said she had spent the previous weeks trying to find the right moment to address this, and that with the people who loved her most present, this felt like the right moment to be honest. She said, "I have proof and I am done being silent." She said I had been taking money from her account without permission for 3 years. 60 people heard that. My uncle Raymond, sitting to my right, was one of them. I placed both hands flat on the table in front of me. Not gripping, flat, the specific position of a person who is keeping their hands visible and their body still. I looked at the centerpiece, a small glass vase with garden flowers from my mother's own beds, which I had arranged myself the previous afternoon. I did not stand up. I did not look at my mother. I did not look at the 60 people who had just turned to look at me. Raymond's jacket was on the back of his chair. In the left outside pocket of that jacket was a letter-sized envelope, slightly creased from the pocket, still sealed. He had picked it up from my mother's hall table when he arrived at her house that morning to help with final preparations. She had asked him to bring in the post. He had. The letter from Prentice Savings had been sitting on top of the pile. He had not opened it. He had put it in his jacket pocket when he came outside, meaning to give it to my mother when there was a quiet moment. There had not been a quiet moment. And then there had been this moment which was not quiet at all, but which was the moment the letter was needed. Raymond reached into his jacket pocket. He took out the envelope. He looked at it, the Prentice Savings return address, my mother's name. He looked at me. I did not nod. I did not do anything. I was looking at the flowers. He looked back at the envelope and he opened it. It was not a long letter, 1 page, the standard Prentice policy update format. Raymond read it in approximately 45 seconds. Then he read it again. Then he stood up. He is a quiet man, my uncle. He has been a secondary school geography teacher for 31 years. He has the specific quality of someone accustomed to rooms full of people who do not want to listen to what he is saying and who has learned over 3 decades that the way to make a room listen is to speak with complete certainty and without any apparent need for a reaction. He said, "Vera, I think you should hear what this letter says." My mother turned from the front of the marquee to look at him. He said, "This is from Prentice Savings. It arrived at your house. It's a standard authorization confirmation. They send these when a customer has active third-party account management." He looked at the letter again. It says the authorized party's access has been active for 36 months, that all transactions during that period were executed under standing authorization, and that the account holder is asked to confirm the arrangement is ongoing. He looked up at the room. It's not an alert. It's a renewal confirmation. Every transfer that went through this account in the past 3 years had your signature on the authorization. My mother's glass was in her hand. She was looking at Raymond with the expression of someone who has just understood that the room they thought they were controlling has shifted in a direction they did not anticipate. Raymond set the letter on the table in front of him. "I think you may have misread it when it first arrived," he said, quietly, without accusation. "These letters can be confusing." He looked at the 60 guests and then back at his sister. "I think this one says something different from what you understood it to say." The marquee was quiet in the specific way that outdoor spaces under canvas go quiet, the ambient noise of the garden continuing underneath the human silence, birdsong, the sound of wind against the roof of the tent, everything else held in suspension. Priya, at the head table, had both hands around her champagne glass. She was not drinking from it. Ethan, beside her, had his hand on the table near hers without touching it. My mother had sat down, not dramatically. She had found her chair and sat, the motion of someone whose legs have made a decision before the rest of them has. I looked at the flowers in the vase. Garden flowers, pale yellow and white, some variety of cosmos, the kind my mother plants every year because they come back reliably without much intervention, which she has always appreciated. I had arranged them myself the previous afternoon, cutting them from her beds in the early evening light. I thought about that, standing at her kitchen counter with the scissors, the specific ordinary quality of doing a careful task in a good light. After a moment, Ethan's mother, a woman named Frances who had driven 3 hours and who I had met twice, said something to the woman beside her in a low voice. The woman beside her laughed, quietly, at something unrelated to what had just happened. The sound was small, and it was enough. The room found its way back to itself, in the imperfect way rooms do after something has changed their composition, without excusing them from continuing. The party continued. Toasts were made, Ethan's father, then Priya's friend from university, then Priya herself, which was brief and specific and made people smile in the way that Priya makes people smile, which is warmly and without effort. I ate. I talked to Delphine and to Ethan's cousin who worked in urban planning and had strong opinions about roundabouts that I found, in the specific way of unexpected conversations, genuinely interesting. I did not leave until after the cake had been cut, which was the natural endpoint, and I said goodbye to Priya and to Ethan with the completeness of someone who has decided they are not going to let an afternoon cost them what the afternoon was actually for. On the drive home, I pulled over on a residential street 3 miles from my mother's house and sat in the car for 14 minutes. I did not call anyone. I looked at the dashboard. I let the 14 minutes pass. Then I pulled back onto the road and drove home. What happened in the weeks after the party arrived in the way that consequences arrive when a public correction has been witnessed by 60 people, not in a single reversal, but in the accumulating weight of many smaller ones. The first was Raymond. He called me the following morning from the allotment. He said he had gone through the letter more carefully when he got home and that he understood now the full context of the policy update and what it meant for the 3 years of transfers. He said he wanted to know if I had kept records. I said I had 36 monthly summaries, each one sent to my mother's email, plus the authorization log I maintained as part of my standard practice for any account I managed. He said he would like to see them if I was willing. I said I would send them that afternoon. I sent them. All 36 summaries. The authorization log. The email thread of my mother's replies. The questions she had asked. The answers I had given. The 3 occasions she had specifically thanked me for managing a problem she had not known how to address herself. Raymond read them over 2 days. He called me on Tuesday and said, "This is a very thorough record." I said I knew. He said, "I'm going to speak to your mother." I said I understood. He said, "I'm not doing this to take sides. I'm doing it because the record says something specific and she needs to understand what it says." The second consequence was Jillian. I did not seek this one out. It came to me through Priya, who told me about it 6 weeks after the party, with the uncomfortable directness she uses when she has decided I should know something. Jillian, who had been the origin of my mother's concern, had attended the engagement party as a guest. She had been in the marquee. She had heard Raymond read from the letter. She had, according to Priya, left before the cake and had not spoken to my mother since. I do not know what Jillian made of what she had set in motion. What I know is that my mother mentioned her name only once in a conversation we had later, in the specific way of someone referencing a person who has receded from relevance. The third consequence was the most significant, and it took the longest to arrive. My mother called me 11 weeks after the party. 11 weeks is a long time, and I had let it be long. I had not called her, had not sent the monthly summary for July, because I had suspended the account management arrangement the day after the party, and had written to the bank to confirm the suspension and to request a full transaction history for my own records. The July summary would have been a summary of a single month in which I had done nothing which was accurate, and which felt correct to send only when there was a conversation to send it alongside. She called on a Thursday evening. She said she had been trying to find the right words. She said she was not certain she had found them yet, but she was calling anyway. She said she had read the summaries Raymond had asked her to read. She said she had read her own replies to them, the questions, the thank yous, the 2 instances in which she had specifically asked me to make a transfer that she had needed done quickly. She said reading her own replies had been different from reading the summaries, because the summaries were my record and her replies were hers, and hers said something about what she had understood and consented to that she had not, until reading them, fully confronted. She said, "I think I let someone make me doubt something I didn't have any real reason to doubt." I said I understood how that could happen. She said it was not an explanation. I said I knew. I said that what I needed from her was not a full accounting, not immediately. What I needed was for her to understand that the records existed, that they were complete, and that if she ever had a question about any transaction in those 36 months, I could answer it from the documentation. She said that she did not have any questions. I said I was glad. She said she was sorry. I said I heard her. We talked for an hour. At the end of it, I said I would need some time before I resumed managing her accounts, because trust between 2 people in a financial arrangement is not a document and cannot be restored by one. It takes time and ordinary contact and the gradual accumulation of a new record. She said she understood. I said I would be in touch. I have been in touch. We have had 3 dinners since the party, at her house, at mine, and at Priya's, which was the first time all 3 of us were in the same room since June, and which was easier than I had expected, possibly because Priya has the specific social skill of creating an occasion so warm that the things that are not warm get quiet inside it. My mother and I are not where we were before the party. We are somewhere new, which is not worse, but it is different, and I am still learning its shape. My work at Marrow Capital continues. 3 months after the party, I was allocated 2 additional client accounts as part of a portfolio expansion, bringing my total to 9, the largest allocation in my cohort. My manager, a woman named Saoirse Adeyemi, said in my annual review that my documentation standards were the benchmark the team works from, which is the kind of sentence that means more in retrospect than it does in the moment. I wrote it down and kept the review in the same folder where I keep the authorization log.
The folder is on my desk.
It has 36 monthly summaries, an authorization log, 31 reply emails from my mother, and a copy of the Prentice Savings letter that Raymond gave me when he was finished with it. The letter is a single page. It is not dramatic. It is a policy update, written in the plain language of bank communications, and it says clearly in the second paragraph that the account holder has maintained an active third-party authorization for 36 months and that all transactions during that period were executed under that authorization. It says that the arrangement is working as intended. I have thought about what my mother believed when she read that letter for the first time, alone in her kitchen, without the context that Raymond read aloud in the marquee. I have thought about Jillian and the question she planted, and about how a question that arrives at the right angle can make a thing you know look like a thing you need to verify. I do not blame my mother for the doubt, exactly. I blame her for what she did with it. Those are different things, and the difference matters to me. What I know is that I had been careful for 3 years. Not because I anticipated needing to be. Because carefulness is the habit of my work, and I had brought it home with me the way you bring professional habits home. Unconsciously, because they are how you move through the world now, because you no longer know how to do the work without them. The record existed because I am the kind of person who keeps records. It said what it said, because I had done what I said I was doing. And when someone tried to describe it as something else, in front of 60 people in a garden marquee on a Saturday afternoon in June, the record was already in an envelope in my uncle's jacket pocket. I did not put it there. I had not known he would pick up the post. What I had done was create the conditions under which the truth was findable, laid out in 36 monthly documents, corroborated by 31 reply emails, confirmed by a bank's own authorization record, so that when someone needed to find it, it was there. That is the only thing I have ever had to do with the truth. Not announce it, not defend it. Keep it organized and let it be findable when the moment arrives. The moment I return to most often is not Raymond standing up. It is the 14 minutes I sat in my car on the residential street 3 miles from the party. I had the radio off. The windows were up. I looked at the dashboard and thought about 36 monthly summaries and an authorization log and a letter that had been sitting in a jacket pocket for 2 hours. I thought about the fact that I had not known the letter was there. I had not known my uncle would pick up the post. I had not arranged any of it. I had simply done my job carefully for 3 years, and the careful work had been in the room, and the room had found it. If you have ever had someone take something you built with genuine care and describe it as damage, if someone has stood in front of the people you love and turned your effort into evidence against you, tell me in the comments what you did in the quiet afterward. Not the confrontation, the quiet. Because the quiet is where the real accounting happens. I read every comment. If this story reached you, leave a comment and subscribe. A new story goes up every week, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for being here.